Here we are in section 4.1. Chapter 4 is about graphing and writing linear equations, but section 4.1 is just on graphing linear equations. So before we get into that, we're going to just refresh our memories a little bit about what we know about expressions and equations and evaluating them, and then we'll jump into what it means to graph linear equations and how we go about doing that. So this should be the title at the top of your page. Graphing linear equations, 4.1 graphing linear equations. Okay, so first let's look at what we know. If we are going to evaluate an expression such as 2xy plus 3 times x plus y, when x equals 5 and y equals, we'll say 2, okay? If it just told us to evaluate this, evaluate, right? Think right in the middle here is value, well, almost. So we're finding the value. There's no equal sign, right? So this is just an expression, and we're going to substitute x equals 5 and y equals 2, okay? So we have 2 times 5 times 2, right, because y equals 2, plus 3 times 5 plus 2. And now we can know 2 times 5 is 10, times 2 is 20, plus, well, we can do this is 3 times 7, right? 5 plus 2 is 7, because now we want to remember PEMDAS, the order of operations. Remember this? We have parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. And really, these two can be done simultaneously, and these two can be done simultaneously. Okay, so that's order of operations is really important now. Parentheses, inside the parentheses, then the exponents, then multiplication and division, then addition and subtraction. So we have 20 plus 21, and that equals 41. So we evaluate this expression when x equals 5 and y equals 2, and we get 41. Okay, I think we're good with that. Let's look at just one more, though, that's similar. If we have 16a squared minus 4b, and we want to evaluate this for a equals 1/4 and b equals 6. All right, so we have those two. So we have 16 times 1/4 squared minus 4 times 6, right? We just plugged in 1/4 for A and 6 for B. So 16 times 1/4 squared. This is like 1/4 times 1/4, right? Minus, well, this 4 times 6 is 24. So we have 16 times, well, 1 times 1 is 1, 4 times 4 is 16, minus 24. Put that up here. So this right here, we seem to have confusion about this, some of us anyways. This is a whole number times a fraction, right? Well, this whole number is 16 over 1, right? So then we just multiply straight across. So 16 times 1 is 16. 1 times 16 is 16. Minus 24. Well, what is 16 over 16? Anything over itself is just 1, right? Minus 24. So that's negative 23. So when we evaluate this expression up here for a equals 1/4 and b equals 6, we get negative 23. Another quick little review is when we have our coordinate plane, right? This is the x-axis, this is the y-axis. I know you know that. This is quadrant 1. That's Roman numerals for these. Quadrant 2, quadrant 3, quadrant 4. So in quadrant 1, for our coordinate point, x is positive and y is positive, always, right? For quadrant 2, x is negative, y is positive, right? Because y is always going to be positive when you're above the x-axis, right? Y is positive. If you're below the x-axis, y is negative. Likewise, if you're on to the left of the x-axis, x is negative. To the right of the x-axis, x is positive. So, in quadrant 3, we're going to have negative x, negative y. And for quadrant 4, positive x, negative y. All right? So this means for every point in these quadrants, this is going to be a property of that x value and that y value for that given quadrant. So what we're talking about specifically now are linear equations. And a linear equation is an equation whose graph is on a line. Okay? Think linear. We have the word line in here, right? It's on a line. And the solutions to any linear equation are the points on a line. So, to find the solutions of an equation, if I have an equation x plus y equals 3, and I want to know what are some of the solutions, right? Because there are infinite solutions, essentially, because for every x along this line, there's going to be a y, right? Well, let's say I want to know when x equals 1. So I can plug in 1 plus y equals 3 minus 1 minus 1, y equals 2. So the solution is 1, 2. When x is 1, y equals 2. So that is one solution. I could find any other number of solutions given either x or y and then solving for the other variable, and that gives me another point or solution. So let's look at an example with a word problem. This is like a real life situation of an equation. So the wind speed y equals wind speed in miles per hour of a tropical storm is y equals 2x plus 66. Y equals 2x plus 66. Where x is the number of hours after the storm enters the Gulf of Mexico. Okay, so let's think about this. So when x is any given number, so let's say x is 2, that means when the storm has been gone for 2 hours, what is the wind speed? Y. Likewise, if we know the wind speed y, we can determine x, which will tell us how long the storm has been gone. Okay, so to graph this equation, you could do it on a calculator. I'm just going to draw a rough graph here. So this number, all these numbers play a part, right? So this number is the y-intercept, meaning it's where the graph crosses the y-axis. So let's just say this is 66. And then this number is the slope, which is the change in y over the change in x. So if we went up 2 and over 1, and this graph is obviously very off because it's going to be very skewed since these are 1, 2, and 66 right here. So you would count from 66 up to over 1, right? Because the whole number 2 is equal to 2 over 1. And it's x, you go change in y over change in x, so you go up 2 and over 1. So we'd count up 2 from 66 to 68 and go over 1 on the x-axis, and then we would graph it. Okay? And again, this is just a really, really rough graph just to talk about it. But you would graph something like this probably on a calculator since this y-intercept 66 is a big number. And then when does the storm become a hurricane? Well, you can't see this bit of information, but alongside the problem it says a tropical storm becomes a hurricane when wind speeds are at least 74 miles per hour. So wind speed is dealing with which variable, x or y? Y, right? So we would plug in, I'm going to go ahead and erase. Oops. we're just going to start on a new sheet so that we have space. So we have y equals 2x plus 66. Okay, so the wind speed, it becomes a hurricane when the wind speed is 74. So that's dealing with the y variable, right? Because the original problem said the wind speed y. So when y is 74, and our question was when does the storm become a hurricane? Well, now we just solve for x, plus 66, so minus 66, minus 66, 8 equals 2x, right? That went away. Divide by 2, 4 equals x. So, 4 hours, that's our answer. So what does that mean in the context of the problem? Well, it means 4 hours after the storm enters the Gulf of Mexico, it becomes a hurricane, usually. Okay? So, let's look at one more thing. We're going to talk about horizontal lines and vertical lines. If you are graphing a horizontal line, the horizontal line is going to go something like this, right? This is our x-axis, this is our y-axis. Well, think about this. This line isn't going up at all, right? So if slope, which is m, slope, is change in y over change in x, that sign, that triangle is called delta. It's a Greek symbol. And in math, it means change in something. So change in y over change in x, which we're going to talk a lot more about all these things, so don't panic. The y, there's no vertical, right? So it's just 0 divided by going in both directions, right? By a lot of change in x, which 0 divided by anything is just going to be 0. So the equation for the graph of a horizontal line is always going to be y equals some number. So in this case, we'll say y equals 3. So whenever you see this situation, y equals some number, negative, positive, anything, fraction, decimal, just y equals a number, that is a horizontal line. When you see x, y, a vertical line, well, in this case, remember m, the slope, m equals change in y over change in x. Well, this y is going up, right? So it's going to be some number over 0 because there's no horizontal movement of a vertical line. It's just the slope is constantly going upwards. Well, a number divided by 0 in math is undefined. So the slope of a vertical line is undefined. Again, I'm giving you more information than you need to know right now, but just it's to give you a little bit of the bigger picture. So, if a horizontal line is y equals a number, what do you think a vertical line equation is? X equals some number, and in this case we'll say x equals 4, okay? So anytime you see an equation that's x equals some number, again it can be negative, positive, a fraction, a decimal, but it's just x equals a number, the line is vertical, okay? So, get those things in your notes, and we will talk a lot more about all of this in class. I'm not going to give you any practice problems because I know you had a lot of homework and your other stuff. Okay, see you in class.